Hello everyone. Today, I'd like to provide an overview of Japan's economic activity through figures. You may have heard of the term Gross Domestic Product, GDP, which is used as an indicator of the scale of a country's economic activity. GDP is defined as the total value of all goods and services produced within a country over a specific period, evaluated at market prices. If Japan's GDP increases, it implies that the Japanese economy is growing. Then, how large is Japan's GDP? And where does it stand globally? Let's take a look at some figures. Japan's nominal GDP in 2021 reached approximately $5 trillion, making it the third largest economy in the world, behind the United States with approximately $23 trillion and China with approximately $18 trillion. This table is based on the nominal GDP values for 2021, adjusted for purchasing power parity, PPP. Rather than converting currencies using the exchange rate at a given time, PPP uses the amount of money needed to purchase the same basket of goods to determine the conversion rate to dollars. For example, if a hamburger costs 910 yen in Japan and $7 in the United States, the exchange rate is evaluated as $1 equals 130 yen. The table uses the PPP values calculated by the World Bank. When evaluated with PPP, China ranks first, followed by the United States, India, and then Japan. GDP is calculated in accordance with the international standards set by the United Nations. Macroeconomic statistics related to economic activity, including GDP, are compiled and published as National Accounts of Japan. The figures below are all taken from figures published by the Cabinet Office. GDP can be observed from multiple aspects, such as production, expenditure, and income. As these are different perspectives of the same thing, they should amount to the same total when properly calculated. This is known as the principle of equivalence of three aspects of GDP. Let's first look at it from the production perspective. In 2021, goods and services worth 1,035 trillion yen were produced domestically. However, this includes items used for intermediate input, so we deduct those to avoid double counting. For example, if a 300 yen bread is produced using 200 yen worth of flour, and this flour was produced using 100 yen worth of wheat, then adding the production values alone would count the wheat 3 times and the flour twice. After adjusting for statistical discrepancies, Japan's GDP from the production perspective in 2021 amounts to approximately 549.4 trillion yen. This table breaks down that total by industry. Primary industries, such as agriculture, forestry, and fisheries, account for just about 1% of the share. Secondary industries, including mining, manufacturing, and construction, account for a bit over a quarter, about 26%. Manufacturing alone accounts for just over 1/5, or around 20%. Today, the share of tertiary industries is overwhelmingly large, at 73%. Next, let's look at the expenditure perspective. From the viewpoint of those who purchase the produced goods and services, it counts as expenditure. As illustrated in these figures, our private final consumption expenditure, amounts to 294 trillion yen. Looking at the share shown in the table on the right, private final consumption expenditure accounts for about 54%, over half. Government final consumption expenditure amounts to approximately 118 trillion yen. However, this includes mandatory education textbook costs and other costs, so the meaning slightly differs from the government's own expenditure. Looking at the share, it amounts to about 22%. About 141 trillion yen, approximately 26%, was spent on total capital formation, such as housing investment, corporate facility investment, and public investment. Subtracting imports from exports of goods and services, GDP from the expenditure perspective amounts to approximately 549.4 trillion yen, which equals the GDP from the production perspective. The output should always belong to someone. Lastly, let's look at GDP from the income perspective. The operating surplus in mixed income, which corresponds to corporate and individual business profits, amounts to about 77 trillion yen. Our wages, our compensation of employees, amount to approximately 289 trillion yen. The net amount of indirect taxes levied on production and imports minus subsidies, is about 47 trillion yen. The depreciation of buildings and machinery equipment is approximately 139 trillion yen. The sum of these values is equal to the total value added calculated from the production perspective of GDP. After adjusting for statistical discrepancies, the GDP from the income perspective amounts to approximately 549.4 trillion yen, which is the same as the GDP from the production and expenditure perspectives. Let's take a closer look at where the value added goes. We'll exclude taxes, subsidies and capital depletion. In addition, we'll add income from abroad, like received interest. This is called factor cost-based national income. The distribution share of the output of economic activities calculated in this way is as shown in this table. Our wages, compensation of employees, account for about 3/4, or around 73%. In contrast, entrepreneurial income is about 20%. Income from property, such as interest and dividends, is about 7%. How was that? I hope this has given you a bit of an idea of what Japan's economic activities look like. Although, the amounts are so large that they might be hard to imagine. Today, we've looked at Japan's economic activities through figures. Let's meet again soon. Thanks for watching.